Hey, I'm Andy. Welcome to the Church Basement Podcast. Next week is October, or Sober October, for anyone joining me on this month-long challenge to not drink. And I thought I could kick things off a little early by talking about my story regarding alcohol. So I have been sober from alcohol for several years, and I've learned a lot during that time, which I'll get into over the next month. But I thought I could share a little bit of the backstory about how I got to this point of choosing to stop drinking and why I've stayed on this path of sobriety. So, going all the way back to the beginning, I did not start drinking until I was in college. In fact, it was my first week in college when I had my first beer. It was also the first time I got drunk. And I actually remember getting a call from my girlfriend at the time who lived back home, and she cried because I was clearly being silly. If only I'd seen that as a sign of things to come, but I didn't. During college, I definitely used alcohol to escape, to fit in, to have fun, to party. I liked the way it made me feel, and it seems like a pretty typical experience that you think of when it comes to college. But it did get over the top occasionally. I did experience blackouts and getting super sick, throwing up, all the things you'd expect when you give a very scrawny kid way too much alcohol. Now, for the record, I don't consider this good or healthy behavior, but I do think it's common for a lot of college students who have never been exposed to alcohol and are curious or are immature or are carrying around some wounds or some baggage to end up in this place. And this is a way many young adults deal with life. And looking back, it's exactly what I did. That combined with believing, you're only young once and you want to experience life, blah, blah, blah. And you end up just making alcohol a part of your day-to-day experience. This is definitely where I was at in college. This is kind of where the story of me and alcohol began. I lived the typical college party lifestyle. After college is where I see the problems start to emerge. This is where alcohol became sort of a coping mechanism for me, where I used alcohol more to escape the things I was experiencing that were making me feel all sorts of emotions. I had just moved to a big city for my first job. I was lonely. I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't really enjoying life at all. That first job out of college, it was just a real adjustment. I had this expectation and real life did not match up. It was just a really, really tough period for me. I was lonely, I was depressed, I was angry, and I didn't know what to do. So I found myself drinking more and more, and not to party, but to just escape how I felt. I was on my own and I was on my couch and I was drunk. And this sort of became the theme or a pattern in my life. When life was easy or when things were good, drinking wasn't a big problem. And when life was tough and challenging or crappy or stressful or whatever it was, that's when I would turn to alcohol to numb and escape. But back then, I didn't really see this pattern and I didn't really see drinking as a problem. I saw everyday life as a problem and my situation and my circumstances as the problem. Those were the things that led to feeling crappy, and feeling crappy sucks, so that's when I drank. When things changed and got better in life, well, didn't feel as crappy and didn't drink as much, and things did get better. After this rough patch, I moved home. I enjoyed my job a lot more. I was around friends. I started getting into fitness, and right around this time, I also became a Christian. So I sort of found some motivation to limit my drinking. I wasn't experiencing the uncomfortable emotions, so there weren't those triggers, and I was trying to get healthy and fit, and I was discovering what it meant to follow Jesus. This is when it seemed like my drinking and use of alcohol was under control. There was the occasional wine with dinner, beer at a baseball game, that sort of thing, but it wasn't a big deal. It's during those periods when I felt like alcohol was just totally optional, not a problem. But when life got tough, old patterns emerged, and life got tough. I got married, I became a pastor at the same time, and eventually I became a dad. None of this was easy. At least it wasn't easy for me. And the problem was really how I felt. Stress from trying to do it all and to do it better and to just nail it. Shame from failing to meet this standard and expectation I'd set for myself. Shame from failing as a husband, failing as a dad. And these are both new territory. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was angry because things were just so tough and not at all like I had expected. I didn't have healthy ways of dealing with stress emotions, shame, and alcohol became a go-to for dealing with all that. Or more accurately, not dealing with it, but rather numbing it. So drinking became more and more a part of my life. And as a Christian and as a pastor, that led to more and more shame and guilt. And I hated it, but I was stuck in a pattern. And I remember going to stores, worried people might see me buy alcohol. And so I went to stores that were further away from my house and further away from the community to avoid seeing anyone who might recognize me because I had this fear and this shame. I was hiding it from my wife more and more. She'd find empty bottles hidden in places in the house or in the garbage, and she'd be like, "What's going on?" And I wasn't really honest because I wasn't honest with myself. I had a problem. And it took a long time for me to finally say enough is enough. Admit that I don't think I should drink alcohol anymore. Sadly, it took a lot more problems, some pretty low periods in life before I really realized I think this is a problem. So for the next month, I'm going to dive into what I realized and learned since, but I'll share a story about the first time I was asked why I stopped drinking. I was camping with some friends, and it was my first year camping where I wasn't drinking anymore. And someone asked me, "Andy, why don't you drink anymore?" I said something like, alcohol was getting in the way of me being able to do what I wanted to do. And that's a pretty good, simple explanation, actually. But when I look back with hindsight and more reflection and wisdom, I think about all of this. I can say with confidence that alcohol was stopping me from growing up. It was stopping me from being the kind of guy I wanted to be. It was stopping me from being the kind of dad I wanted to be, husband I wanted to be. It was stopping me from chasing some goals I had around fitness and in life. Alcohol was just getting in the way of everything I wanted to do and everything I wanted to be. It was eating away at my finances. It was taking up time. It made me feel like garbage. All this stuff just pushed me to this breaking point where I said, enough is enough. And I gave it up, and that was the beginning of starting to grow up. 35 years old, finally growing up. But I'm extremely grateful I was able to make that choice, and it's been one of the best choices I've ever made. So during the next month, I'm going to dive into some of these topics, and whether alcohol is a problem for you or not, Sober October can be a real game changer. No matter what, you're going to learn something, and you're going to experience something. Personally, I'm at a much better place because I chose sobriety, and I think this next month, if you can commit to a whole month of being sober, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself. You're going to end up in a better place than you would have otherwise. And to be clear, there's no judgment from here on out. When I look back on myself, I don't look back on myself as an idiot or less than or stupid or, horrible person. I look back on myself as a guy who he didn't know a lot of the things that could have helped me, a guy who lacked support at certain times in life, a guy who was losing the battle with shame. I was a guy who had secrets. No one knew these things about me, and I was keeping secrets. And so it led to a young guy who continued down a very bad path until it got worse and worse. But no matter who you are, sobriety is an option, and it might be a great option for you like it was for me. So that's it for today. I hope you're going to join me. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or even YouTube. You can also subscribe to my Substack, where I'll be posting everything along with links and additional content related to today's podcast. You'll find all that information below. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you October 1st.